So let's start with a bit of background. Like, how did you end becoming a CTO? How did you end in that path?
So I didn't start in computer science. I always wanted to build things, but I wanted to build real things. So I studied civil engineering, geotechnical engineering in particular. Wanted to go around the world and build bridges or oil wells or whatever. I ended up taking a job as an environmental consultant in San Francisco in 1996, and that's exactly when the web started really taking off. So I've followed from the sidelines. I learned a few things about how to develop for the web, read a few books, started applying that in my job as an environmental consultant. We had tools that were not on the web, so I kind of built an interface for it. I started looking into the database and got really hooked into the power of this new medium that you could, with a few lines of code, create an entirely new experience. And then in 2000, I decided to make the switch, so I took a job as a junior developer in a photo sharing startup in San Francisco, right before the bubble burst. So it was an entirely different experience.
Great timing.
I was employee number 30. I think we went to 120 and back to 10 in 1 year.
So great timing.
I ended up being director of engineering at the end. Sony acquired part of the company and part of the team, and I stayed on as a consultant for a few years. And then at the end of 2005, I met my two co-founders, Kevin and Julia from Eventbrite. Kevin had the idea already, had just met Julia. They were not married at the time. They had started dating 3 months before we decided to go on this adventure together. And that's how I ended up being a CTO of Eventbrite.
What was the main driver for you to take that position?
I think Kevin's track record, he had started a couple of businesses before, had invested in PayPal. He was trying to build businesses on top of PayPal. PayPal had the huge advantage of having very low friction to send money to someone. So with just an email address, you could send $10 or whatever to a person. So we thought we could apply that to the event business, where organizers are always looking for cash. So ticket sales could go directly into their PayPal account with a very simple integration. So it appealed to me because it was very simple. It could apply to a tremendous amount of people who just didn't have any technology at their disposal at the time. The event space was catered to for the much larger stadiums and big sporting events, concerts, but for this type of event, there just wasn't any good solutions. So we could see definitely that there was a big market, and that if we applied the right set of technologies, self-service platform that anybody can join, that has instant payments to your bank accounts, like that was pretty appealing, and that's why I decided to join them.
And at this stage, did you raise any seed money, or was it bootstrapping for a while, or?
It was bootstrapped by 250K that my co-founder put in for about 2 years.
So then, how was life for the first 2 years?
It was very streamlined. I was actually in France when we started, and they were in San Francisco, so they would do the product design during their day. I would code during the night. They would QA the next day. So we had this like constant iteration loop, which was very fast moving. We had quick iterations. We got all the support emails from everyone that used the platform, and started getting a lot of traction in San Francisco with tech events. That was our natural playground, then tech events elsewhere, then other types of events in the US. And then 2 years later, we were used in 150 countries for a reason I think that is simple, is that we were the only product that catered to a very big market. And when you build self-service products, eventually they make their way to a wide range of places you didn't think you would ever be used in.
And when was it that you started building a team? Like initially, I understand it was only you for a long period. So when did you start making the first hires? Who were those guys?
I think within 6 months, we hired our first junior programmer who just came out of college that Kevin had met and really liked. So he didn't stay very long because in the end, he wasn't really helping. I was teaching him more than he was helping. So we made a lot of these small mistakes at the beginning building the team. But after 2 years, I think I had 3 engineers, that's it. So we stayed quite small for a long time.
And how was the journey then? Like, when did you see that was starting to be something big? How did it follow funding? How did it follow growth in the team?
So I think that when we raised our Series A is when we started to feel like, yes, we're onto something. It was at the end of the financial crisis, at the end of 2009. We actually needed money earlier than that in 2008. And thankfully, we were able to raise from friends and family in 2008 when the crisis hit. And all the VCs were not investing anymore. You remember the rest in peace Sequoia memo that they sent to all their portfolio companies. Well, Sequoia invested in my co-founder's previous company, so we got the memo as well. It was too bad because we needed the money, so we found another way and managed to still grow quite nicely in 2008, 2009, and then at the end of 2009, Sequoia made the investment. We were about 30 people at the time, so still quite small, but the traction was really nice. We had really good numbers. The word of mouth around the product was really strong. I think that's what compelled Sequoia to invest. And then, yeah, we started our payment processing as well. So we started to see that people were willing to pay for our service. So all the stars like kind of aligned at that time.
And can you tell us a little bit about the background on the team, like on the engineering team, like who were the first hires? When did you start thinking about maybe a VP of engineering? When did you start thinking about maybe splitting teams, new offices? Like how did the whole organization evolve?
So I think like many startups at the beginning, you focus on finding the jack of all trades, people who can do everything. I was exactly like that. I'm a specialist in nothing, but I can understand everything. At the beginning, worked well. I was the sysadmin, the DBA, et cetera, et cetera. And then we built the team who could build features quickly. So those were generalists in general who could tackle front-end to back-end to schema design. We had about 5-10 people in 2009 that were quite on that model. And then after we got the investment, we started hiring more people who were more specialized who could solve some of the problems that we had, because we didn't spend a ton of time architecting the system in the beginning. Best practices that we have today were not prevalent at the time, so it was still a big monolith. One database, no services, front end coupled with the back end. So we started to have the need of people who had done different things in different places to come in and really take us to the next level, whether it was for our infrastructure. We started with just one server. By 2009, we already had switched to EC2, so that was a big transition where we needed experience on the team. And that's how we started building. We kept the team in San Francisco for a long time, mostly out of the need of everyone being in the same room. Until 2011, everyone was in SF. That worked really well, and that's when we hired a VP of engineering.
How many engineers did you have in the team when you hired the VP?
I think we had 15. So I was managing them mostly remotely from France, which worked okay, but I didn't feel that's where my time was the best spent. Like we had a lot of growth, a lot of issues with large events selling quickly. Like we were not ready for that. So we had a lot of technical problems to solve, and I think the split CTO VP engineering is quite clear in that case. Like you need to focus on the technology, bringing innovation to the product, and then let someone else handle hiring, firing, organizing, and growing the team. So that's when we decided to make that move. I think it was the right move at the time and still now. And then we expanded the team geographically when we acquired a company in South America who had a very strong technical team of, I think there were only 4 people at the time. But they're still with the company today, and 4 years later. And the cost is much lower. The quality is on par, I think, with what you can find in other places. So it made sense for us to have that as a new development center. And since then, we added one in Nashville as well, where we opened our customer support center, and we found really good profiles. So now we have 3 development centers.
How many engineers in the team at the moment?
So until about 9 months ago, we had 150, I think, and we just purchased 2 companies, one with 80 people, the other with 180 people. So now we're about 200 plus on the engineering team.
Do you know all of them?
I know all the engineers, yes. That's the part I'm trying to stay current with. Not all the new ones, because they just started last week.
Okay.
We had 184 people start on one day. So it's a different exercise, but over time I will make sure to know them all, yes.
And personally, how has it been the journey? Because as the way I understand it is, as you grow as a CTO, you need to start letting go many things that you have been doing, and you are moving out of your comfort zone in many other areas that you are exploring for the first time. So how has been that journey for you?
Very gradual. It's like going through school at the same time as you're building a company. The one thing I always try to do is stay focused on the most important thing in engineering that I could contribute to. So finding the toughest problem we have and trying to build, either do it myself if I can, or build a team around me to build it. Internationalization, for example, when we built the platform, we were not internationalizable at all. Everything, all the strings were in the HTML, there was no separation, no localization. So I took on the task of making us internationalizable, because I thought that was really important for us to grow. So finding these projects that I think I probably stayed too long in the doing the heavy lifting. It was really important for the company, so I enjoyed doing it. But maybe one thing that you don't do very well at the beginning is strategy in general. As you grow, I think you need that strategy to be a lot more concise, incorporate a lot of the things that will bite you eventually, when like tech debt reduction, taking care of finishing the projects. Like a lot of projects we started, we made some improvements, we never went all the way. These, in retrospect, on our investment, we probably should have pushed a bit harder, even at the expense of moving faster. And personally, you have to understand what you're good at and what you're not good at. That's why I think realizing that we needed a VP of engineering to grow, finding my place in the organization is something I've had to adapt to the new reality every time we expanded the team. Deciding what you want to work on, I think that's where wearing your founder's hat is really important, because you have really two roles. Founder, inspiring the people and making them understand why you started the company, what are the tenets of why we are building this company together. We're building this company together. Making sure your principles are applied, and also the CTO looking at technology trends, who to hire, how to structure the teams internally, how to work with product, how to work with all the other departments. So those are two different hats. And the founder hat, I think I never left it. The CTO hat, sometimes I left it to other people who were more qualified.
And you mentioned, or you touched on that point of letting go things maybe later than you should have, or like, is there any lessons learned on that? Like, what would you do differently today if you will go through that path? Like, is there anything that you will let go earlier? Is there anything that you should never let go?
So I've learned a lot through the process on how to build software properly. Like I grew up with ASP and scripting languages, and the way we do things now is very different. So I would invest a lot more in setting up the architecture properly, having tests. We didn't have tests for several years. We had to catch up on a lot of things that really made us waste a lot of effort. If I had set it up the right way at the beginning, I think we would have probably been able to move faster on some things. So that's the main thing I would do very differently. And then hire quality people from the get-go. Don't settle for what you can afford. I think it's better to try to raise more money if you can hire great talent than hiring the junior guy who's, yes, he's going to work for $20 an hour, but he's not really going to give you the value that you need to take your company to the next level.
And how does your ambition grow? Because you are both a leader of the organization, but also a shareholder, and you see that the value of your shares are growing over time. So how does your ambition change over time as you see that you are into something bigger and bigger and bigger? Is there any tipping points where you say, wow, 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 wow?
Oh yeah, there's lots of those. As you report on the numbers, like every time you have a new milestone, it's a celebration. It's like you passed a threshold. Remember celebrating our $100 million of ticket sales. That was 2009, I think, and that was a big milestone. Then 1 billion. This year we'll do 4 billion. So it's every time the stakes are higher, but also the reward can be a lot higher. Having a big team enables us to do things in a much better, more structured way than before. And shareholder value follows. Like if you create value for your customers, if you create value for your employees, you realize that the potential is very, very large. And now we're talking about unicorn status and all these things. So yeah, plenty of milestones, and that's why it's a very exhilarating adventure to be part of it. And that's why also I stay motivated. I think we've only scratched the surface of the potential market for us. We're going upstream, we're going into different verticals, we're building new products in the chain of event management. We have the entire ad event experience that we haven't really touched yet. So there's plenty of opportunities for us to build a $10 billion company at some point.
What's the key motivation as you keep on growing? Like, what's the most rewarding thing that you feel when you are working on this role?
I think building a lasting self-sustaining company. So we were not profitable until this year. And reaching that really gave us peace of mind in a sense. Like we are in control of our destiny. If we don't want to go public, we don't have to. We can self-finance, we can finance innovation that we were kind of afraid of touching before. We can take more risk. So it's really empowering to get to that stage. And if I had left a few years earlier, I think I wouldn't have had that experience and also getting the reward that you get from knowing that the future is still very bright, that we can decide what investments we want to make. And when these 184 people joined the team last week, it was like giving us a new lease on life almost. We filled up the office to the brim, to the maximum capacity, I think, with a new energy. We aligned with their interest, our interest. We created a new structure. We created business units in the process. So it's like getting another 10-year lease on life through that exercise, and that's very exciting to me.
And being the leader on the tech organization, how do you deal with the uncertainty of potentially not knowing the answer? Because everyone is going to be potentially looking at you for an answer all the time, but this is the first time you're navigating that path. So how do you deal with that kind of situation?
I think you get the right people in the room to think through the problem, to come up with a strategy to attack the issue that you're encountering. And you have to trust the experience you bring on board as you hire talent will help you guide everyone to a positive outcome. Not always the case, like we made a lot of mistakes. We switched strategy several times over the years, but we always put ourselves into question, like do we have the right business model? Do we have the right people? Do we have the right structure? And every 6 months we go through the same exercise. So being constantly vigilant and really putting the business first and our clients first, I think helped us come up with strategy that makes sense in the long term and got us to this point of being the leader in our space.
One question, I don't know the answer. You've been involved with the board of the company?
With the board?
Yeah.
Yes, so especially in the early days, and since then we've had different people report at different times. I've never been on the board. We've had a very evolving board over the years. We have a very strong board now. It built over time with the right talents being added to the team.
How does it feel to be part of those strategic decisions that might change the direction you're following? Because you're a shareholder and you're also the person who is implementing the technology. So how do you deal with those many high-level decisions that are affecting the life of everyone in your organization, potentially not being part? So how do you deal with those?
I mean, you can't be part of every decision. So at some point, revenue decisions will go outside of engineering as well. And you don't have anything to say about it because you have a CRO who's responsible for the number. You will work with them to address the engineering priorities as well as the product priorities. But I think you have to nobody controls the entire strategy anymore. It's a group effort. We have all our senior leaders involved in the planning process. We hear all the voices. We have task force that think through specific problems. The board doesn't dictate what we do. We present things to them, they give us feedback, we incorporate or not their feedback. And I think that's the healthy tension between the board that functions well and your management team, who ultimately they're the ones responsible. Like the board member is not going to get kicked out if we don't meet our numbers, the CRO is going to be kicked out. So putting the responsibilities in the right place and taking the feedback as feedback and not as orders, I think it's something that's very hard to do for small companies, for example, small startups. You have this new VC who just put 10 million in your company, you feel like you owe them some servitude, or at least to incorporate everything they say into your roadmap. But it's your company ultimately, and I think that's a principle that we kept true and since the start. We always had board meetings, for example. Even when it was the three of us, we had board meetings. We had friends as board members and people that we knew, but I think it's a very good exercise also as a management team to go through that process.
And you just mentioned priorities, right? Like, how do your key priorities change over time as the company is growing? Like, what has been your North Star at the different stages of the business?
That's a good question. I think the North Star has been the problem we're solving. And until now, it's been how do we solve ticketing and how do we make it available to everyone? I think now it's still 99% of our revenue, but we realize that there's a lot of potential outside of that, whether it's the event experience or advertising tools for organizers or different tools for different verticals. We acquired a company that does event venue management, which is very different than what we did. So starting to think beyond ticketing and how do we build an enduring company, a platform that is used not only for ticketing, but for other parts of the event lifecycle. I think we'll stay true to the field we're in. The live experience is what made us successful. It's a very exciting field where that had not had innovation for a long time, and we think we still have a lot to bring to the table through technology to really transform the experience. And that's what keeps me excited, all the new things that are coming with blockchain, AR, VR, all these things that have not made it here yet, except at a demo booth in one of the startups. But I think there's a lot of creative things we can put together to change the status quo, and that's what we're all about, I think.
And how do you deal with a significantly large organization and innovation, which usually are considered two paradigms that don't go well?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a challenge, especially as your organization ages. We're 11 years old now. We have a lot of tech debt. We have choices that we made early on that are not optimal. So it's very easy to focus on the short-term revenue goals and forget about the long-term roadmap. I think it takes finding the right structure for the organization, and we've iterated many times over the course of the 11 years in how we're structured. Since Julia took over, I think Kevin, my co-founder, left about a year and a half ago. Julia, his wife, took over, and she tried to really position us well for the next 10 years. So we've done a lot of thinking around innovation in particular, and this is going to be it has to be somehow separated from the business units that have short-term goals if you want to make it fully integrated into the things that we think about. So that's, I think, the direction we're going. Empowering business unit to finance innovation with a group of people who are true entrepreneurs and who can think creatively about how you put all these technologies together to create a better experience.
So do you think that innovation needs to come bottom up, from the business units, from the guys who are in the field understanding feedback?
I think it needs to come from everywhere, but with the right people to build prototypes quickly, to test them out, to have designers who can crank out designs without taking 6 months because they are thinking about branding and consistency and multi-destination, multi-device problems, for example. So how do you put the right team together to filter all the inputs from the business units, from partners, from startups we talk to in this space, from employees who want to do something different, and prioritize? Because we can't be doing everything also. So how do you pick the right technology, bring them together, test them out, and then how do you incubate these businesses into becoming bigger business lines? When do you separate them from an incubation period into a separate business unit, or do you incorporate them into a major business unit? Those are all the things we're trying to figure out now, but we have a dedicated investment to do that.
Do you feel that you're moving from being a disruptor to an incumbent, or that doesn't come into the
And when you're the leader in your market, you automatically become the incumbent. So we're the biggest ticket.
Do you become more paranoid when you start thinking that way, or?
Not really, because we feel we have so much to offer still and so much to improve. I think if we were the incumbent and had nothing to improve and saw all these guys coming and beating us in left and right, but that's not the case. We have a product that does what it does. Some parts are great, other parts need to be improved for sure. So given that we're the leader and we have so much to improve, I think our potential is only going to go up. And innovation is something we haven't really invested enough in the last few years. So I think that's the danger as you become bigger. You really focus on other goals. Profitability was our number one goal last year. We got there, but it took a lot of concerted effort to get there. And that is to the detriment of other priorities for sure.
And at the moment, there is a lot of very exciting technologies. I guess you keep an eye on all of them. Like, just thinking, like we've seen, I think, 4, 5, 6 companies trying to build a new Eventbrite on top of blockchain, distributed, no company, it's a foundation. So how do you think about those technologies in general? Is there, like, we still really don't understand well that space to place our own bets, but it has potential to not only change the way we think about technology, but it's also, maybe it's not even a company, right? Like there is not stocks in that company that you buy, and how that can affect you in terms of disruption.
So I think there's a lot of startups out there that are created just to use technology, and they find a space that seemed appealing. I think that's trivializing a little the complexity of the business part of it. And I think technology should create a better experience, and we're definitely looking at blockchain as something that could make the experience, especially of reselling tickets or exchanging them or controlling them at the gate. Like, you don't need a PDF ticket anymore. So that's something that will eventually, out of, I think, obvious necessity, incorporate into our tooling. I don't think it's just having blockchain will make you a great ticketing company. Like, you still have to understand the user's needs. There's a lot of functionality that doesn't rely on blockchain that you still need to build. So it's exciting to see people trying things out. And we've acquired several companies over the years that have tried things. They've built prototype. They've got some traction. And we've acquired them because their technology was the best in the market. So I'm definitely all for people trying new things with new technology. It informs us as to what could become popular. And hopefully we'll have enough people dedicated to thinking about these futuristic technologies and how we incorporate them into our products to deliver also on this front.
And we've seen you're now venture partner at Index, so what's next for you and for Eventbrite?
And investing in something I've been doing as my pastime as an angel for a while, so I wanted to see what the world of the VC industry is from the inside, so that's why I took the opportunity to be venture partner in Index, and I've learned a lot over the last 7 months. It's not been a long time yet, but and I'm not quite. I do want to focus on Eventbrite for a long time. I think it's a company I love. I built it, and it feels like my baby. I'm not quite ready to give it away, but investing and through my work with Index, I've ran into several companies that I've introduced to the Eventbrite teams, whether it's marketing tooling or DevOps or other QA systems. Like, we are going to integrate several of the companies I've found. So I think it's great for my role of having to be vigilant about what's coming, seeing other companies try new things, find best products out there for us to try. I think there's a lot of innovation out there that through my work with Index will be beneficial for Eventbrite and vice versa.
That's cool. That's true. Any questions from the audience?
You guys are ready for
Come
the
on.
drinks, I think.
Yeah? Okay. Give an applause to Renaud. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
joining.